pushing for India's inclusion in UNSC, and a blistering attack of a kind for lack of reforms in United Nations, reminding UN that while it was set up for the needs of that era, those don't count anymore. We need to evolve with times, and United Nations needs to evolve with times. And of course, why is it that India is such a large and powerful country is still being kept out of the entire decision making process? Very quickly, let me go across to Ambassador Anil Trigunia. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for patiently waiting. Key takeaways for you from this speech?
Well, I think this was very smartly done a speech in which he has focused on the key issues without directly attacking anyone. He has clearly outlined that the victors' conclave of the 1945 is no longer relevant, and therefore it is extremely important. He has touched upon the COVID inefficiency of the UN. He has also brought out the shortcomings. But the most important thing, the positive in his view, is in order to become relevant, it is important that India becomes an integral part of the decision-making process of the United Nations. And that is the clear-cut message. Secondly, he has also very clearly put greater emphasis on the neighborhood policies. And neighborhood does not, in his vision, exclude any of these countries, which are even currently in conflict with us. So I believe that this was a very intelligently crafted speech in which he has pushed on the positive aspect of India as to how India, he spoke about the reform, perform. And so these are the things that are going to be useful. And then he has committed that India will be, as a pharmacy of the world or the vaccine factory of the world, is going to provide to the world through its logistics, that is what you need from a great power. When it wants to work on it. You might say, some critics might say that, oh, it is just the words. It's not that the word. United Nations was for the global welfare, and that is precisely what he has worked out, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, considering the world as a family, and without getting into the power politics of the nations or the P5 or the others, he has very clearly staked the right claim for India. And if you remember last time he had mentioned that India does not demand its right. It commands its place in the Unity Committee of Nations, especially at the high table at the UNSC. So I believe that this was a very good speech, and which would have gone down well without getting into discriminations and all kinds of small things which were not even expected of him. He focused on the clear things. Terrorism remains a major concern for the whole world, and that is extremely important that he's underlined. So I believe that, in my view, he has very clearly brought out India's strongest credentials in the 21st century and its relevance into the decision-making body of the world.
Maruf, since you were making the point about, the relevance and the role of United Nations currently and how effective it is, would you then say that the PM did the right thing by making, carrying out such a blistering attack on lack of reforms in UN?
Is that for me, Tanvi?
Yes, Maruf.
Hello. Hello. Yeah. I don't know who the question is for.
Yes. Maruf Raza, to you, the question to you.
Well, I can only say that those who are watching the show before the Prime Minister's speech would know that I came down very strongly against the UN's established bureaucratic ways. Now, the fact of the matter is that, India has felt very, very deeply marginalized, not just because we are 1/6 of humanity, not just because we've laid down the maximum number of lives in UN peacekeeping operations. Prime Minister said nearly 50. The accurate figure I have is 49 such operations since the UN started these operations in the Gaza Strip. But also the fact is that, we have abided by every UN rule in the game. Now, Pakistanis would turn around and say, what about respecting UN resolutions? Pakistanis would do well for themselves to read the UN resolutions, which requires them to, implement part 2 of the resolutions before our role comes into play. So they are the actual defaulters in that. But, Pakistan is a dead end as far as I'm concerned. What is more important is I think India has this opportunity now for a 2-year tenure to see one last time that is the UN open to reform. Now, people may argue that India doesn't have the economic heft of China, but neither does Britain or France have the economic heft of China. So by that account, should America and China only be at the UN Security Council? Or should the UN Security Council or an elite club of countries be now representative of the humanity of the world? By that count, we certainly make it. And also an important aspect is that we can go around saying that, we've done this and we've done that. But what is more important is that we are willing to cooperate and lend a helping hand, even on occasions. And I know there is one instance like that, and that was in Congo in 1960, where we moved in to save a genocide and a massacre there, even before the UN could take a decision to do something about the people of Congo. So we have a very impressive track record. And the honorable diplomats who are on the show, both of whom I respect, I think they and their fraternity need to do a lot more hard knocking at the UN to actually lay out India's case. And I may be marginalized in this group when I turn around and say that, if the UN doesn't deliver, we should walk out. But 75 years, Tanvi, you will agree with me, is about the lifetime of any of us to wait for some change to happen. And it hasn't happened. So I think even in our existing lifetimes, the UN would probably touch 100 and we'd still be debating the same issue that we are debating today. That is where my pessimism comes from, not by saying that the UN is the only overpriced debating society, so we must be part of that and go and lay out our case. The point at issue is, it's like water on a duck's back. It's not happening. And what can you do to make it happen? And that is the question I would ask our honorable diplomats who've actually seen the workings of the UN and not lesser mortals like me who sit on a TV screen and criticize the UN.
Okay. Let's also say good evening to Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, and perhaps, if you want to respond and add to what Maruf is saying here, Mr. Chakravarti.
Well, I'm completely with Maruf in terms of the frustration that we all have with the United Nations. Let me also recall that the precursor of the United Nations, League of Nations, did not succeed precisely because of the realpolitik of that time and had to be replaced by the United Nations. Are we looking at that kind of a scenario, in another 20 years or 30 years or 100 years or whatever? So I think what has happened is that there is a growing level of frustration with the UN and its working. And I think the COVID pandemic, this Chinese virus, which is now devastating all the economies, has certainly thrown up the fact that the UN has failed in its task of managing a global pandemic and a global problem. And I think that is an important factor, which is, of course, related to how the rise of China and the vacation of strategic space by President Trump and his disruptive policies. But leave that aside, that's a general kind of a thing. Getting back to the PM speech, I think he has definitely balanced two things. One is that the lack of reform, which has made everybody very pessimistic. And the other, of course, is saying also saying that UN is a great organization and has had its day under the sun. and can again sort of lift itself up by the bootstraps. So I think these are the two different aspects of the PM speech. And apart from the fact that how India has been helping in peacekeeping, India is the factory of the world for vaccines, and all kinds of things that,
Right.
that the PM had mentioned. So I think this is basically, look, let's face it, that a 75-year-old organization built on the ruins of the Second World War is not going to, cannot proceed beyond a point in this kind of digital era, cyberspace, when the whole power structure has changed, the international order has changed. So we have to reform, and I think that is going to happen, and sometime or the other. But let me also say that countries like China are going to block it rather than any other country. So China is the biggest block, as I can see, because it does not want Japan, it does not want India, and it does not want any other power from Asia to be in the Security Council as a permanent member of the Security Council. It is of course backing diversity in Security Council, that it should have more developing countries, etc., and things like that, which probably means that from Africa or Latin America and other countries. So I think what we are facing is basically a very hard-nosed realpolitik in the UN, which has always been there. That if the permanent five do not agree to certain things, it never happens. I mean, you can keep on passing resolutions in the UNGA, but it doesn't get implemented. So I think the whole structure needs to be looked at. And I think the UN also needs to downsize. It has grown too big with all kinds of organizations that are affiliated to it. It has become a drain on the resources of the UN. And I think the kind of organizations that do real good work should be retained. International Telecommunication Union or WHO, of course, is now sort of in the doghouse for various other reasons. The Civil Aviation Organization, all kinds of things that have contributed.
If I may, Mr. Chakravarti, just come in here.
So I think there are many other organizations.
If I may just come in here, and we will come back to the larger role of UN. But I had one query, and maybe you or any of our other panelists can, help us understand this better. But a part of Prime Minister's speech was also to say that India's partnerships are always guided, by this principle from neighborhood first policy to Act East policy, as well as the idea of security and growth. We always keep the interest of humankind in mind, and our partnerships are always guided by this very principle. And this is the interesting part. Any gesture of friendship by India towards one country is not directed against any third country. Is there a specific equation that he seems to be referring to over here?
No specific.
I think what he's basically saying is that India does not have ulterior motives in promoting any sort of policy, neighborhood policy or anything. After all, it is well accepted that the neighborhood policy is something that we have pursued for ages, since the time of Chanakya, but knowing fully well the realpolitik of the situation. But then neighborhood policy is important because, you see, what is our primary goal? It is the country's development, economic, social, whatever. So I think you need a peaceful periphery for that. So I think neighborhood first policy, Look East policy or Act East policy had a different motivation because of the shifting nature of our trade towards the East. So I think there are many other issues like that. And benign in that, basically what I think PM has been underlining is that India's rise is benign. At one time, it was said China's rise is peaceful, but no longer, as we can also see. And but India is not going to go the China way. That is what PM has said, and that we are different, and our attitude, our objectives in a harmonious world are different.
Okay, let me also bring in Smita Sharma on this. Smita, we were having a conversation of what we need to look forward to. Clearly, for me, the two big takeaways were the way, actually, and his choice of words when he spoke about the need of reforms in UN as well as India's inclusion in UNSC. Not issues that he's not mentioned in the past, but definitely the choice of words was stronger this time. Would you agree?
Absolutely, Tanvi. And I think, he did build upon taking further that argument that I mentioned during the high level plenary meeting address earlier this week, where he spoke about the crisis of confidence as far as the UN is concerned. So, what he did here was, this question that you put forward about saying that when India extends a hand of friendship, it's essentially not directed at or targeting a third country. It could be read in both ways. It's not just in terms of the neighborhood first policy, but when you are arguing and batting, making that very strong pitch for an urgent reform, for a seat on the high table, for a vote in the Security Council. I mean, who are the major players that you're looking at? You're looking at the US, you're looking at China, you're looking at Russia, countries that are really not sort of the best of friends. They never were, and neither are they at this point in time. And in particular, of course, the kind of relationship that India enjoys now, the proximity in terms of strategic cooperation, defense, military cooperation with the Americans in Indo-Pacific. These equations, they become very complex. So my understanding was really, what Prime Minister Modi did there was try and project that in not reforming and in not giving a voice to a country as important as India, not just because of its population size, but when he projected all the internal transformations that have been happening, be it he spoke about Atmanirbhar Bharat, he spoke about other social projects. Of course, there are big questions there. I mean, internally, India faces enormous crisis today, be it in terms of the social fabric, be it in terms of polarization, or in terms of the economic crisis at hand. It's massive. Just earlier this evening, in fact, I saw Adar Punarwala, tweet out that the big question is next year, will the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare be able to put out some 80,000 crore rupees to ensure the massive disbursement, procurement of vaccines
Correct.
to its population of 130 crores? So these are internal challenges facing India. But I think the Prime Minister's point was that in leaving out India, in denying, and which is why that frustration and the choice of those strong words. And I think that in a way is also my answer to Maruf, when he rightly, of course, criticizes the UN, and most of us agree with it. And let me also just add here very quickly that while he's being very humble in calling himself a lesser mortal, I do know of a lot of diplomats who do agree that India seems to be barking up the wrong tree. We have had these G4 efforts going on for years with Germany, Brazil, and Japan. They have not been yielding any results. But if you walk out of the UN and the UN still exists, what happens then? I mean, today already there is an enormous question that if the US is in a position where it is shrinking back from its responsibilities in the next 1 year itself, some important 15 positions are going up for votes, there will be that huge vacuum which will only be exploited by a player like China. So it's not really going to be an advantage. In fact, India needs to be inside the room and talk about these dynamic coalition buildings even more, in fact, assertively and aggressively, something it's done in the past on issues of disarmament, two other issues. But I really don't think sitting out of the room is an option, as long as if the UN is grazed down completely, you try and build a new alternate structure, it's a different thing. But if the structure exists, sitting out only means giving more manipulative advantage to a country like China.
Okay. Point taken. Maruf, do you want to add to what Smita is saying here?
No, Smita has been extremely articulate and has brought out very, very sort of accurately a number of issues. But, let me take this whole issue, the last point she made, a little further. You see, I know that most people would argue that you have to be within an organization to reform it. But an example of Switzerland exists, which is not a UN member country. But all the damn UN offices, with the exception of the main UN building given by the Rockefellers and New York, exists in Switzerland. And every other body operates out of Switzerland. So I'm just giving an alternate option to people who look for opportunities within the UN, because one of the areas where a lot of Indians look for opportunities is probably to get a UN job and everything else that goes with it, which Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti rightly brought out, that there is a lot of dead weight the UN carries with it. But on a more serious note, let me bring out 2-3 things. You know, Kofi Annan, when he was Secretary General of the UN, had initiated a study, and the study was called, if I remember, called the ECOSOC, which means Economic and Social Reforms at the UN. And in that study, they had put together a whole lot of other initiatives that the UN could actually take on to make itself relevant more than just the September gathering every year, which becomes a platform for everybody to come and make their case on whatever issues matter to their people, which they feel that, prime ministers of Pakistan are not really speaking to the UN, but they're speaking to the people of Pakistan from a UN podium. So we need to go beyond that. The other aspect that I feel very strongly about is that we have this, to me, last-ditch opportunity of a 2-year stint in the UN Security Council, where we should actually seriously seek for a reform of the UN charters. And it is not wrong for people who are political scientists to say that the UN Security Council, which is made up of the 5 countries, America, Russia, China, Britain, and France, is made of one superpower, one to-be superpower, one has-been superpower, and 2 lesser powers. And many of them, particularly Britain, would obviously sort of sniff and walk out of any debate when you talk of reforming the Security Council or the UN. So the problem needs to be held by its collar and addressed by, and that is why I'm saying that when a country of India's size threatens to walk out of the UN, then it might just be a wake-up call. It's like, 25 years ago, every academic I met who turned around and told us that if you go nuclear, then, you'll go hungry because there'll be sanctions let loose on you. But we still chose to go nuclear. I was that handful of a few who said that the merits of going nuclear. And today, you're not just taken seriously, but a lot of other doors have opened for you gradually because the world comes around to accepting that there is another view. Don't give ineptitude a sense of permanence by supporting what the UN has come to be. Do you know the group of 4 countries that India is part of, India, Brazil, Japan, and Germany, that once the UN expanded, Security Council expanded, 2 of them, as per the UN Charter, are enemy countries. I mean, what the hell are we talking about? Have we done our homework? Or we just wait for the September audience and half of them are probably too tired of listening to countries like Pakistan? Certainly they want to listen to Mr. Modi because, to his credit, and I think Smita will agree with me on that, he does come up every year with some really good ideas. I remember a year or 2 ago, it was about the use of solar power that India could offer as a kind of a leader to the world as an energy alternative. And today we're talking again about India not having an agenda with its neighborhood. And let me tell you, there were 2 slight references in his speech that clearly meant Pakistan and China. He talked of terrorism, drug peddling, and money laundering. Exactly for those reasons is Pakistan in the dock now with the FATF. He talked of countries only supporting those countries which serves their agenda. China supporting Pakistan's case every time it comes up for being sanctioned for harboring terrorists. But obviously, it's not Mr. Modi's style to take names. Not now, not never. I've never heard him name Pakistan or China in a serious speech wherein he's pointed fingers at them deftly. But to me, India has a role to play. To me, India can play a role either by accepting the reality of the UN as it exists and just going there and lagaing hajri and getting on with doing other things in global forums where we can make a difference. And let's not debate and hanker over the fact that we are sitting with the other ranks in the General Assembly. Or If you want to spearhead change,
Okay.
remember, we were a founding member of the UN. We pushed China's case in the 50s in the UN. China wasn't a member of the UN. We pushed it in. And if Shashi Tharoor's account is to be believed, we are the country that ensured that China gets the Security Council seat, which, ironically, it uses against us. So what is it that we can do now, 75 years later, having done the first set of initiatives? And it was us that talked of global disarmament well before this became part of the jargon of journalists, politicians, and academics. And today, we are seen as
Okay, so let me
nowhere
take
in
that
the
point,
narrative.
Mr. Maruf Raza. Let me take up that point and go across to Ambassador Trigubneth. What can we do now that we've not done or said or repeatedly now said, and the arguments made to be part of the decision making, Ambassador Trigubneth?
You see that I could very clearly appreciate what my friend Maruf has said it. I mean, this all of us at some time or the other do feel and get frustrated. And Prime Minister also expressed the frustration of 1.3 billion Indians when he spoke about that. For how long are we going to wait? So this is something kind of a clarion call for the whole community, international community, that is required. Let us be very frank about it. Like say the UN actually means different things to different countries and different people or different members. The major powers consider it, especially the United States, as an instrument of its foreign policy. It is not it might be altruistic in certain sense, but it is not sitting there for altruistic purposes. Those who wield the power, and that was the very basis that they retained the veto, which has been the biggest problem in the whole system so far. And for the middle powers, basically they try to create their own space and the international power games. But for the developing countries or least developing countries, it is considered as some kind of a guarantor of their sovereignty. So that is how you are going to look at the way the countries are looking at it. As far as India is concerned, India has staked its claim several times, and now what we have added more is that is the three things essentially that the Prime Minister mentioned and that India stands for. And one is that we have stood against terrorism, which is the biggest threat, which is like 1C, counter-terrorism. The other one is the COVID-19 is the new thing that has added, which has given India a different kind of a salience there. And then also climate change, where we are taking the lead. India has, as he also mentioned, about the several initiatives which had never been happening before this, like the ISA International Solar Alliance, which is a very major initiative. You are winning the seats with the greatest of margins, whether it was in International Court of Justice, where we fought against the British judge, or it is in the ECOSOC where you fought against China. So that is a certain kind of a heft that India is getting by way of its benign resurgence as an economic power. I mean, impact of COVID apart, but India is trying to engage with the world through its COVID diplomacy as well. And that is where the China and the other countries are being very well exposed without any problem. Now, this is the right time. What we can do perhaps is, I mean, there was an opportunity after 10 years, the United Nations Security Council was supposed to call the General Conference under the Section 109. And that can something that should be brought about so that when the Security Council becomes defunct in a way because of the interests of these some 5P5, the other 10 members really just stand there backing and call of these people. So we cannot be there. Now that we are inside there, what we can do is we can try to create some kind of a critical mass within this UN Security Council, and also urge that there should be the reforms like recently everybody mentioned about G4 only a few days before we had the meeting of the foreign ministers. They have very clearly spoken about what they want now. We do not want only the talks. We want the actual discussions, negotiations, and the movement, forward movement. So India is quite serious. I think that we cannot continue forever. But I also believe that we cannot just quit because we have been the founding members. It's our also duty to be not only acquire the right place, but to see to it as a watchdog that the things really move forward. And we are now a president of the WHO, World Health Assembly.
Okay.
So we are in different places. So I guess that we need to continue to work with the like-minded countries, with the Alliance of Democracies, with the developing countries, because we are trying to project as a leadership role once again for all the developing world, and they are accepting it. So this is where we are. I mean, which is clearly visible in all the so many
Right.
the elections that have been held. So I believe that we have a good chance, but we need to pursue it. Nobody wants to give up the power that they have. That is the given. So we need to force it somehow that there be a new kind of system that can emerge, whether through the General Assembly or General Conference remains to be seen.
All right. Well, I'm going to thank all of you. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your perspective. Adding so much from your own wisdom to what was said today and where we could go as far as our role at United Nations is concerned. A tough message from PM, tough stance taken repeatedly, asking UN why is India being kept out of decision making. Our time is now. And there are reforms that are required at UN, which the authorities and the Assembly itself should explain why these reforms are not being brought in. We cannot have a charter that was made half a century ago for what is required for the world today. And I think one of the other big takeaways was India's role in this COVID era. The fact that we are a pharmaceutical manufacturing and also a research hub, and that we will play a big role even in the COVID vaccine, helping the entire world, was a big, strong message that Prime Minister Modi sent from this global platform. Completely out of time on this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.